Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, we go inside the epic takedown of SpamHaus, and then we'll break down why Cloudflare's flexible SSL is the exact opposite of security. Then it's a great big batch of your questions, our answers, and a rockin' roundup. All that and a heck of a lot more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi, everybody, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 195 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems network and administration podcast. We stream this episode live on December 18th, 2014. This episode is brought to you by our three fine sponsors, DigitalOcean, Ting, and iXsystems. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. Our live stream, why, that's powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at scaleengine.com. You should go check it out. It's really quite amazing. We've been using it for a long time now. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Hey, Alan, you time traveler. I noticed that you happen to have a pretty nice shirt on there, too.
Yes.
You got that's the charcoal gray Jupiter Broadcasting polo.
Yes.
That looks really sharp.
Much more comfortable than I was expecting. I was expecting more of a work shirt kind of thing.
But the way it sits is very comfy, right? Yeah, I know.
Yes. And the material is very soft. I like it.
We could have been twinsies. I should have brought mine. I should have been thinking, Alan. Well, so this is technically the release of this episode will be on the 1st of January. Now we're
next year, or this year, or whatever year it is.
So we couldn't just let the occasion pass without maybe just throwing out there one prediction or two.
Yeah.
Do you want me to start with mine? Because mine's kind of...
yeah, you can do yours first.
Yeah, I like yours a lot. Mine is, I predict over 2015 that there's going to be some hard lessons learned in the container space, specifically on Linux. I think there's going to be a lot of really awesome gains. Rocket, I suspect, is going to be pretty impressive, and I think Docker will continue to see a lot of enterprise-level adoption. But somewhere in there, I don't know if it be a breach or a really well-respected research paper or maybe it's a presentation at Black Hat, but I think at some point there's going to be a hard knock lesson for containers. And 2015 will be the year we realize, okay, we've jumped in really hot on this on the Linux space, but now there's some things we need to sort of dial back and work out. I know it's not like a groundbreaking prediction, but I think it's probably pretty solid.
So containers will be good and bad?
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be containers continue to get deployed, but this year, 2015, will be the year we realize there is some security issues that have yet to be totally resolved. I suspect. All right, Alan, what's your big prediction for 2015?
I think it'll be the thing I'm going to be keeping a big eye on and watching closely and seeing how it changes everything is SMR, or shingled magnetic recording. This is Seagate's new technology where basically up until now the way hard drives have worked is you write data in tracks on the disk.
Right.
But basically with the way technology is now, the size of the head needed to read the data is a lot smaller than the size of the head needed to write the data. So their idea is to overlap so say the track is this wide, you would overlay tracks like shingles on your roof. Now, this is going to be kind of adjustable depending on how much, depending on the workload, you'll want a different amount of overlap, right? You'll get a lot more storage. The more overlap you have, the more storage you have, but the bigger penalty you have every time you have to write. Because when you want to write data, when you have it shingled like this, especially the bottom shingle, basically, you have to read all the layers, pick them up, and then rewrite them down in the correct order. And so these drives are going to have an area of flash on them where they can spool that up and take care of it. And so they'll almost start becoming like SSDs with having like a flash translation layer or something where, the sectors won't actually necessarily be laid out how you would expect them or how the computer expected them to be. One of the big differences here is that they're planning on two different models of these. One version being what's called host aware, where the drive is actually going to let the operating system know what's happening as far as these moving around and stuff are, so that the operating system or the file system can take advantage of that information and make changes and optimize and so on.
So is your prediction these are going to become pretty common or more popular in 2015?
I don't know if I have a prediction. I know that this is a thing that's probably going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
I've already seen a number of conversations about it and how that will interact with ZFS, especially with the fact that ZFS is copy on write and it's log structured. without the host aware part, it could mean the drive is working basically against you all the time. But with the host support, it could mean that because you in ZFS you write blocks in big chunks and you don't go and overwrite that block over there as frequently. It means that you could actually optimize to actually basically work with the SMR even better. Right? Because every time you change a block, you don't go and have to try to change the middle of that layer of shingles over here.
Right.
You just write all the data again over here.
So if it was
and
aware,
then collect it over layer. Yeah. So then it can take care of the garbage collection, and maybe you can signal the drive. All right. I've trimmed here, here, and here. So there's only these 2 shingles out of this stack of 8 shingles left. Let's rewrite them with the next batch over here, and keep it all clean.
There's already a drive they're getting close to shipping, right? A 5 terabyte.
I think they're shipping an 8 terabyte SMR drive. That's actually covered in one of our roundup stories later on.
Yep.
They mention it. They don't really get into the details. They don't have them yet. In particular, they're just starting to become available, so it's not like you can go to the store and buy one very easily at this point. But
well, you could see how it would behoove ZFS to be able to support that natively, because that kind of high capacity storage is going to be perfect for a file server.
Exactly.
Who would be probably following these cutting edge trends and integrating it immediately and totally understanding it from the beginning? That'd be iXsystems.
Yep.
And you can find out more and totally understand iXsystems by going to iXsystems.com/TechSNAP. Check out some of their awesome hardware powered by those Intel Xeon processors, and download their ultimate guide to buying a new server for open source. It's 11 key traits you got to demand from your provider. They won't spam you. It's just a really good PDF or an ebook that you can download. iXsystems.
It's that kind of flashy marketing material stuff that you would get from a competitor like Dell or HP or somebody that the management type people expect. And it basically allows IX to be sitting on the same level as those instead of looking like some small group, because they're actually quite big. And if you look at their client list, you can see that they're taken very seriously by some serious people. Yeah,
their client list is pretty awesome. We do like to pull it up from time to time. They've got everybody on there from Walt Disney to Sony to U.S. Army to Adobe. They've got Wise on there, VMware, GM, Juniper, VeriSign, Autodesk, University of Florida, Berkeley. Look at all these. AdBright, Justin.tv, SurveyMonkey, LinkedIn, Evernote, Twitch, Yelp, Tumblr, Scale Engine. And I was serious too when I say they'll be watching these shingled drives, because they have a couple of products that are pretty closely tied to big storage, like TrueNAS, but also FreeNAS. And just a reminder that FreeNAS 9.3 was recently released, and you can go check it out. Man.
And, all that new, it's integrating a bunch of interesting boot environment stuff they got from PCBSD, which they also sponsor.
Yeah, like doing the snapshots for the updates, right, and whatnot for the OS updates, the boot environments. I'm sorry, the ZFS boot environments. That kind of stuff is really cool. So I guess I need to update my FreeNAS server then. I guess that's what that means. So go check them out, iXsystems.com/TechSNAP, and a big thank you to iXsystems for sponsoring the TechSNAP program.
Yep. Also, they have a TrueNAS that's all SSDs, and is the first one they ship where they recommend you can use dedupe. It's designed for backing VMs with VMware and so on.
Nice.
Looks crazy good.
All right, Alan, our first story this week comes from Mr. Krebs, the author of Spam Nation, and he updates us on some interesting stories. This is kind of like in his area now of expertise.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what's going
on? So Krebs is covering the story about the arrest of one of the people responsible for the SpamHaus attack. If you remember back, 95 weeks ago or so, I think it was episode 102 of TechSNAP where we first talked about it, and then we dug in more in 104. One of the very first of those DNS reflection attacks. And at the time it was, the biggest denial of service attack ever or whatever.
Yes, I remember. But, I remember, yes.
In particular, some people that were upset about being blocked by SpamHaus, which is a spam blacklist, decided to do a denial of service attack against them. And so SpamHaus employed Cloudflare to protect them, and it ended up taking down Cloudflare as well. But one of the people responsible for this is 17-year-old from London, England, in the UK. Has pled guilty for having carried out the denial of service attack against the anti-spamming outfit.
17-year-old, huh?
Yep. He was 16 at the time, actually. So in late March 2013, a massive distributed denial of service attack hit the website of SpamHaus, and they then, who maintains the blacklist of spammers, and they also have a couple other things where they not just blocking like IP addresses and domains, but actually figuring out which person's actually behind the spam and following them around and making their life difficult, so that they can't just start again with a different name, which is what spammers often do. So then the New York Times actually called it the biggest attack ever, and said the combined assault was the largest known denial of service attack ever, although I think they got their information from Cloudflare, not someone that knows what they're talking about. So Cloudflare also dubbed it the attack that almost broke the internet.
Yeah.
In particular, the attack wasn't necessarily larger than anything that the major ISP sees every day. However, it was a little clever in that they were attacking the route servers at the internet exchanges, in particular the London Internet Exchange. Now, that address is actually not supposed to be reachable from the internet. It's only supposed to be reachable by the people that are directly connected to the London Internet Exchange. But due to a misconfiguration, one or more of the members of the London Internet Exchange was leaking a route that allowed people to get there. And by attacking that basically dropped all the peering there. Mm-hmm. And that's a large portion of the traffic that flows through that exchange. And that caused the problem. But, as a response to Cloudflare's claims, where, they were up on the news and on New York Times and so on, evangelizing how they were, we saved this company from like the biggest attack. It would have broke the internet, whatever. Well, the actual CTO of one of the backbones had his little response post where he explains where things they said that were not technically true and so on. And then we tore into it a bit more in that episode 104 of TechSNAP, which I also linked to. But the Krebs article actually digs into the rest of the story, the stuff that the rest of us, we don't know about. So Krebs was actually digging into the website that was responsible for attacking SpamHaus, called StopHaus. This is the group that wanted SpamHaus to go away because they were making the life of the spammers difficult. Mm-hmm. And the spammers believe that it's their legitimate right to run a business, ruining the internet for the rest of us. And the quote here says, "This seems to be good a time as any to look deeper into who's likely the founder and driving force behind the StopHaus movement itself. And after much research, Krebs says, all signs point to an angry, failed spammer living in Florida who runs an organization that calls itself the Church of Common Good."
No.
The lists its leader as Andrew J. Stevens, whose LinkedIn page and short name is Stevens Boy, says that he's a media mercenary at the same organization, the Church of the Common Good or whatever.
This guy is classic.
Hours after the story, he changed a lot of the stuff, took a bunch of stuff off his LinkedIn page, but Krebs, being smart, had saved a screenshot of it as a PDF before going live with the story.
Hilarious.
So that his evidence couldn't be pulled out from underneath him.
Very smart.
He also went and found Stevens' old website from 2011, that it was like andrewjstevens.com or something like that. And his resume lists a stint in 2012 as the owner of an email marketing firm called Digital Dollars and then IVT. Money-making schemes, which Stevens described as beginning to intermediate level guide to successful list marketing in today's email environment, incorporates the use of both white hat and some sketchy techniques you could find on black hat forums, but have avoid anything illegal or unethical. And so he says, and then under his featured work stuff, he lists the SpamHaus or the StopHaus project, Black Hat Learning Center, and a link to a spam software called Quicksend 1.0. And he digs in and shows how he found the guys and linked all the information together and actually found this guy as one of the people behind it. And then he also has a short interview with some other people as well. But his closing note was the good one. He says, putting spammers and other bot feeders into jail for denial of service attacks may be cathartic and make you feel like we're actually doing something, but it certainly doesn't solve the underlying problem. The raw material needed to launch the attacks of this size that hit SpamHaus and Cloudflare are plentiful and freely available online. Right? Lots of people that have not updated routers and that NTP attacks. A couple of groups have been doing a good job of like emailing everybody who's ever sent one of these DNS reflection packets and being like, hey, you got to fix your stuff. You're ruining the internet. And it's helped a lot. But, as far as bots, the number of bots is not really going down as people still have thousands of infected Windows machines, millions of infected Windows machines. And if people just clean those up, there'd be a lot less spam and a lot fewer denial of service attacks in the world.
Yeah. A lot
And
a
so
lot of less
Krebs,
machines under control.
yeah, and so Krebs says, as he noted in the second to last chapter in his book, Spam Nation, the bad news is that little has changed since these ultra-powerful attacks first surfaced more than a decade ago.
That's also true.
Sad. Like
true.
Literally nothing has changed with botnets, denial of service attacks, and spamming, except the DNS reflection, and it was kind of a new thing for a little while, but that we clamped down on that pretty hard. But the main thing there is that the big DNS servers that were being used in the reflection attacks just had a lot bigger connections.
Right.
So having 1,000 of those is better than having 10,000 desktops.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Well, very interesting to see that kind of from that perspective. And Brian Krebs always has some great information.
Yeah, I definitely recommend you check out the post. It goes in a lot more detail than I could go through in the show.
All right, Alan. Well, I got some details for you. That's our friends over at Ting. Go to techsnap.ting.com. Won't you go there? Go there right now, won't you? Just go there and say, hey, thanks for supporting the show by visiting techsnap.ting.com. In fact, while you're there, let's do a thought exercise. Click on that savings calculator. Plug in your current information to Ting. Because here's what's great about Ting. No contract, and you only pay for what you use. So you'll plug in how much you actually use, not how much the telco has convinced you to prepay for, but your actual usage. Put that info in there and do the calculation. If you're like me, it's about $2,000 every 2 years. That's enough to buy a new laptop every 2 years. TechSNAP.ting.com will give you $25 off your first device. If you've already got a compatible device, because you can bring your own, they'll give you $25 in service credit. And Ting has a lot of really great devices on their page. I've pulled out a couple that I would recommend, a few ranges here. $88. The Kyocera Kona. It's a feature phone, straightforward, basically lasts you a few days, maybe even longer. Has integrated Bluetooth, so it'll still work if you have a car that has Bluetooth functionality. $88 for this phone. And then you own it. It's yours. There's no contract. $6 for the line, and then just your minutes, your messages, and your megabytes. That's how Ting bills you. They just take whatever you use and add it up. Another recommendation, you want to go on the higher end. $340 for an HTC One M7. This is one of my favorite phones of all time. This is one of the Cadillac Android phones with incredible front-facing speakers that are excellent for podcast listening. You won't need an external audio box. You won't need to hook it up to anything. I used to drive around in my truck listening to podcasts on those speakers. That is a great phone. $340 from Ting shipped. That's really nice. TechSNAP.ting.com to get $25 off these devices. There's also the Nexus 5. The go-to, right? And as Ting begins to roll out GSM in February, having something like the Nexus 5 where you can go CDMA or GSM is really, really a nice option. Lots of great devices. TechSNAP.ting.com. Try out the savings calculator. Visiting there is also a vote for the TechSNAP show, showing them that you appreciate them supporting us, and it gives you a chance to check them out. TechSNAP.ting.com. I've been using Ting now for a couple of years. I've never really had to call their customer service. They have a no-hold customer service. You can call them at 1-855-TING-FTW on Alan's East Coast time. It's got to be East Coast time. And a real person answers the phone. But I've always just been able to take advantage of their really great dashboard. I've always been able to just troubleshoot it right there and activate, deactivate, move lines around, stuff like that. TechSNAP.ting.com. Thanks, Ting. Hey, Alan, I believe we have some more Cloudflare coverage, don't we?
Yes.
All right, so what are we going to now?
So this is a post kind of breaking down the problems with Cloudflare's SSL operations that they're trying to promote right now. So they have a couple of different ways you can choose to do SSL with Cloudflare. The first one they call flexible SSL. And this is the one where basically they give a certificate issued by Cloudflare for your site. And then so the user visits Cloudflare and they get an SSL connection and it looks secure, but the data is then retransmitted from Cloudflare to your server without SSL.
What? Really?
Yeah. So this is for if you don't have SSL, you can use Cloudflare to upgrade to having SSL, but the data is not only encrypted part of the way through. So that's not very useful. And there's a bunch of other problems with that. Then they have full SSL, which is they have SSL from the visitor to Cloudflare, where they then decrypt it, play with it a bit, and then re-encrypt it and send it with SSL to your server. However, this one allows a untrusted certificate. So you can just use a self-signed certificate. You don't actually buy an SSL certificate. So you still get the encryption, but you're not really getting the authorization necessarily.
Okay.
Although since only Cloudflare is actually going to be connecting directly to your server, you can still actually use it to secure things. But
Right. I follow.
there's other problems with that, and we'll get to that in a minute. And then they have what they call strict SSL, which is where your server has to have a real certificate.
Okay.
But again, because Cloudflare is decrypting it and then re-encrypting it on their end, they can see everything in the middle because part of their software is analyzing the traffic and also optimizing your website. And so obviously that requires them to not just pass the traffic back and forth, otherwise they're not doing any good. But so to break it down a bit more, so the flexible SSL makes it easy to create a secure channel or a secure connection and have it mean nothing, right? Because the user's encrypted from them to Cloudflare, but it's not encrypted from Cloudflare to your server. So someone snooping can see the credit card numbers or whatever is being transmitted. Do you need a trusted certificate for the latest phishing scam? Then just host on a regular insecure web server somewhere and then set up Cloudflare in front of it, and all of a sudden you have encryption to your spam server.
Yeah.
Or your phishing server or your fake website or whatever.
Yeah.
The issue is that to buy a real SSL certificate costs money, takes time, you have to organize it, they look at who's doing it, whatever. But you can set up hundreds of sites for free and then use Cloudflare to get SSL for them. So that's not really that good. So he said, the author says here, I'm not giving the reader a brilliant criminal idea. I'm sure this is rather obvious to any serious cyber criminal that creates these realistic website copies and then the appealing emails that lead people to them. They've been trying to emulate the security feature of real website, but setting a trusted SSL has been challenged. Now SSL is within their reach, even without the minimum knowledge on how to actually configure SSL on the server. And in particular, it subverts the idea of a secure channel because it's not secure by any reasonable definition, given that data is transmitted in the clear at some point during the connection.
Yeah.
So you're really just tricking your user into thinking it's secure when it's not, because it's only secure for part of the connection. At some point, it's just traveling over the public internet. It also kills the idea of authentication. Given you no longer are interacting with the website's actual servers, you're not really getting proof that you're dealing with the correct website, right? The whole point of SSL is that when you go to the website and the certificate is trusted, you know that the website you're talking to is actually who they claim to be.
Right.
But in the case of this setup, all you're really proving is that this is a person using Cloudflare, not that it's actually the website you want necessarily.
That's
right?
very true. Yeah.
And it opens up a whole new scheme where people could hack the Cloudflare account and then redirect the traffic to a different backend server.
Oh yeah. That's what I was thinking.
So on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it kills the idea of trust, since thousands of bogus certificates emitted this way will not ensure user security. It kind of breaks the whole trust model of the entire web. And he has a couple of links at the bottom of this actually happening, Cloudflare being used to host malware and phishing sites. So then he goes on. He says he's all for proliferating SSL and having everybody have access to SSL. The security is indeed too difficult for the average webmaster to figure out. This means, unfortunately, that most websites that ask for your private data send it in the clear. Certainly, SSL for everyone would be better than that. He says he'd argue that not really. Not only does it empower anyone to create malicious websites, like you just mentioned, but it empowers people who don't know security to do it badly. And to make flexible SSL available, the easiest default option is just that. So you end up, people think they're doing security because they enabled this flexible SSL, not realizing that half the connection isn't encrypted. Or even if they have the SSL, if they don't understand how SSL works, just turning it on and thinking they've solved all the problems is not helping at all, right? And then it raises the bigger question, do you trust Cloudflare entirely, right? If you enable this universal SSL, it gives users a sense of security, that the data they are sending is protected from the prying eyes of attackers. Remember, though, in this setup, Cloudflare has access to the entire data stream in clear text, right? Because it's encrypted from the user to Cloudflare, then Cloudflare decrypts it, looks at it, changes it, re-encrypts it, and sends it. So it's also affecting the other part of SSL, which is once something's encrypted, you can tell if it's been modified and you throw it away and don't use it if it's been modified. But because Cloudflare is sitting in the middle as this trusted party, they can decrypt it, change it, and re-encrypt it and send it. and that causes problems, right? So thus your transmission is only as secure as Cloudflare's infrastructure, right? One zero-day exploit is all it would take to read traffic for potentially millions of websites with a single attack. And this means it could take more than one attack, but certainly not proportional to the number of websites affected, right? Normally, you would have to attack each website individually, but if you just go after Cloudflare, they're one big weak link.
For sure.
Then they have the full SSL option, which allows you to use an untrusted certificate between your server and Cloudflare. And then Cloudflare uses a real certificate between Cloudflare and your users, but Cloudflare still gets to snoop on everything. So even though they're not sending it to you in plain text, they're still snooping on it before they send it on to you encrypted.
This kind of this makes some sense now when we were looking at Heartbleed and how one of the places Google worked with immediately behind the scenes was Cloudflare, right?
Well, I don't know if it was Google, but somebody did
at
Cloudflare,
Google, yeah. Do you think maybe this setup is why? Because they are responsible for so many people's, in a sense, identity?
Possibly.
Because they're kind of representing their customers in a sense doing it this way.
Yes, and if they had been vulnerable to Heartbleed when it first came, if they hadn't had the advance notice, then yeah, there's just huge numbers of sites could have had their keys leaked.
Yeah.
Just by going after Cloudflare.
So it doesn't even have to be. It doesn't even have to be some sort of master hack of Cloudflare. It could just simply be a vulnerability in the software.
Yep. And then he raises the point. Now, sure, Cloudflare may actually be in a better position than you to combat a zero-day. But what about for combating the government? The government comes up and says, "Hey, Cloudflare, we want to snoop on everything."
Yeah. Usually,
here's a gag order, so you can't mention it.
Yeah, once it's centralized like that, it usually just makes it easier for them.
Exactly. Instead of having to con a lot of people, the government has one go-to target. So while Cloudflare tells itself as providing SSL for everyone, we're left to question if that's actually a good thing, and whether some SSL is actually as useful as having end-to-end SSL. And in particular, this isn't end-to-end, right? There's something in the middle that's basically doing a man-in-the-middle attack. It's just a trusted man-in-the-middle. But how much do you really trust them? Well,
it's not even a matter of like them.
Really,
so much
the disaster scenario here is someone hacking Cloudflare and injecting malware in the middle when Cloudflare is modifying the content. And then all of a sudden, this website you trust with the SSL certificate and everything, and malware.
Wow.
Especially when you look at, certain things like Java will give more trust to a website if it has SSL.
Yeah.
Right? Because you know that nothing's been modified. But yeah, so people that don't understand how SSL works really be hosting sites using SSL. Are we giving a false sense of security to the user by letting people that don't know what they're doing have this? Of course, that question comes up with that other project that we talked about a couple of weeks ago from, I think, Mozilla and a couple other people. What's it called? Every SSL or something?
Yeah.
Remember that one? But anyway.
Yep.
But this leaves the person running the website that doesn't know what they're doing but thinks that it's secure because they've enabled this checkbox and now they have SSL, and the users trusting things are secure when they likely aren't, and trusting Cloudflare when maybe that's not the best idea. But yeah, you should definitely check out the blog article here, and it digs into more detail. It includes a post from Netcraft where we see various phishing scams using Cloudflare to get legitimate certificates and so.
You can find a link to that in the show notes. Just go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, look for episode 195 of TechSNAP, and then scroll down right past the download links, and just about everything we covered is listed in the show notes in chronological order.
Yes, I see Netcraft found things like paypal-germany.de.com and PayPal-verification, spelled the German way.com, and with valid-looking SSL certificates that were easy enough to fool people.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good read, Alan. Thank you for finding that. And all right, any other thoughts on that? No. All right.
Nope.
Okay. Well, then why don't I tell you all about DigitalOcean? Head over to DigitalOcean and use our promo code SNAPDecember. Now, this is the transition time, so you probably also have a win with Snap January. But Snap December should work for a little while, and that's going to give you a $10 credit over at DigitalOcean. And I think you're going to want to use this. And it's really cool because the way it works is you apply it to your account. I really like that. So I go and I just fund my DigitalOcean account from time to time. And why do I use them? In fact, I've got several systems up there, and I've been using them for a while. Well, let's get started with what really DigitalOcean's all about. They're a simple cloud hosting provider that's dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way for you to get going and spin up your own cloud server. You can get started in less than 55 seconds, and pricing plans start only $5 per month. Remember now, I said you get a $10 credit when you use the promo code SNAPDecember. So that's 2 months right there because they're starting at $5 a month. You're going to get 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, one CPU, and a terabyte of transfer for that $5. But when you're using our promo code SNAPDecember, well, then you're going to get 2 months, so it's not going to cost you anything for 2 months. They got data center locations in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, and London. But it's that interface. Oh, man, they got a great interface. And a very intuitive control panel. They've managed to strike a balance between power, because they've got, full-fledged DNS management, snapshot management, HTML5 console, so you can watch the whole thing boot up, one-click deployment of things like Docker and GitLab and Rails and PHP and WordPress and all of that. You can choose between the distributions you want to run with. So they've really got a great interface. But on top of that great interface, they've written a really first-class API that you can take advantage of, and you can replicate the functionality on a larger scale. Or if you're like me and you're not going to take advantage of it, you can at least take advantage of some of the stuff that the community has created. Here, for example, is a DigitalOcean Puppet module. This module provides the ability for you to manage your DigitalOcean droplet right from Puppet, which is really cool. Here's another example. Somebody wrote a really nice DigitalOcean management app for Android. It's called DigitalOcean Swimmer. And you can manage the functions of your droplets. You can SSH into the droplet, reboot, power cycle, shut it down, resize, take snapshots, restore, turn backups on or off. You can even create servers from the app. And here's another app. This one's for iOS, and it looks really nice. And again, same kind of thing. Really good interface to manage this stuff from your phone. If you have a problem, you can just do a reboot there. Now, these are all different applications, and there are a lot more than just these. If you go to their community section, they have a page that outlines a ton of them. There's so many great things you can use, and some of them are just like libraries for PHP. There's like a DigitalOcean API library for PHP. Mm-hmm. How great is that? There's a ton of great stuff that the community is writing around this awesome API. So go over to DigitalOcean, check them out, use the promo code SNAPDecember to get the $10 credit, and if you're a whiz on something, they're willing to pay people for tutorials because it's an area they're really investing in. We've got a link in the show notes, $100, $200 for a tutorial, and their editing staff will work with you. So it's really cool. And then if nothing else, you can just take advantage of great tutorials. They've got some of the best. DigitalOcean.com, SNAPDecember. And a big thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. All right, Alan. Well, that's everything I think we have in the news segment, isn't it? I suppose there's probably a new BSD now out while we're recording right now, but I don't know what it was. But you guys did have one for the week, right?
Yep.
Yeah, you guys are on top of it. All right, well, then there you go. That's all the news. You can go to techsnap.reddit.com to help contribute to our news. But with the news all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP at JupiterBroadcasting.com or popping that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website, or even better, starting a thread in our subreddit over at techsnap.reddit.com, like our first email this week. And it comes in from Play to Python, something like that. PlatyPython. Let's go with PlatyPython, Alan. And he wants to get your intakes on a distributed file store. He says he's got 80 servers with anywhere between 6 terabytes and 12 terabytes of 4,000 to 1 megabyte files per machine. He says millions of tiny files. Right now, all of the files are accessed through an HTTP frontend backed by a local POSIX file system. It's kind of like Extended 4. The millions of tiny files are in the web root, basically. It's beginning to get unwieldy. After doing about 15 hours of research, I'm thinking of going with GlusterFS, starting off using a POSIX file system-based store and eventually moving to a key object store since the files are ultimately accessed over HTTP anyway. I've read through that millions of tiny files can be slow in this scenario, and that Hadoop or Ceph, if I'm saying that right,
Hadoop or Ceph, yeah.
Yeah, Hadoop or Ceph, okay, might be a better fit. Is there a better way of attacking this? I need redundancy in case of individual hard drive crashes or a server dies, and need to be performant and stable. Everything else would just be gravy. Alan, any thoughts for this one?
I've actually been looking at GlusterFS for the same thing. because we basically do the same thing. We divide our customers up between different servers. We call SC store 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. And it gets a little pain when older customers all of a sudden start uploading a bunch of extra files and they're running out of space or something. And it'd be nice if we could just say, here's one unified namespace where it has the storage of all these servers, and every file gets stored on at least 2 of the servers in case one of them goes offline, or even if we just want to turn one off to upgrade it or whatever. And so, I've been looking at GlusterFS myself. Hadoop seems too heavyweight. Like, it's kind of seems to be for less file system oriented. And I don't know much about Ceph. GlusterFS has a couple of modes. The nice thing is that it can do an NFS server, so you don't need a special client to read it on other servers. So, for example, with our video storage server, it would be all over the place, and then we have some front-end web servers that would just connect to it by NFS and be able to access the files wherever they happen to be.
So does GlusterFS, is it like the name implies, literally its own file system, or does it sit on top of?
No, it sits, so the client for it can be NFS, or it has its own file system mounty thingy.
Okay.
And then the back end is it stores it as big container blocks on top of whatever your regular file system is.
Okay.
So my plan was ZFS, multiple zvols or whatever to deal with it. And
what about something like does FreeBSD have something like DRDB where it's
we have something called HAST, or high availability storage,
or DRBD.
But that's just mirroring of a block device.
Yeah.
So but what he wants is distributed, right? Where he wants to kind of combine the storage of a bunch of servers to make one virtual file system that has all the files, so that you don't have to know which server it's on to be able to access it. And in particular, that every file is on at least 2 different servers, so that if one of the servers needs to reboot or dies or whatever, the files are still accessible. And that's why I was looking at GlusterFS, because it also has a mode where you still store the files normally separate on all the servers, but you get one unified NFS file system.
I like that a lot.
Where you can read all the files.
That's sweet.
So you don't even have to kind of go all in on GlusterFS. You can just use it to kind of create a union FS of all of your systems.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool.
And there's been quite a bit of work to get GlusterFS ported to FreeBSD, and so I've been playing with that. I got it all compiled and running and not crashing. But I couldn't quite get it to actually do what I wanted yet. But I kind of ran out of time. I haven't got to play with it yet. I'm hoping to have a lot more free time over the holidays, quiet time, get lots done.
No kidding. I know exactly what you mean. All right.
So I think GlusterFS is the way to go there. But that's mostly because I don't know much about Ceph. Mostly kind of looked at GlusterFS because it seemed to have the most active development towards getting FreeBSD going.
All right, Craig writes in with kind of a semi-common question, and I'm not sure we've ever had a really great answer, but we'll take a shot at it. He says, Dear Alan and Chris, I'm sure it's probably been asked before, but I'd like to hear you talk about it. I'm currently a computer science student with true aspirations to become a Linux system administrator. I currently work as a computer tech, and my undergrad was actually reluctantly in marketing. Is it in my best interest to continue my online traditional CS master's program, or to learn on my own and then just earn some certs? Or should I try to do both, or what? What do you guys think? Thanks for the shows, Craig.
It kind of depends. The term computer science has kind of been muddied a bit, but in general, computer science means kind of the learning and designing the algorithms and writing. So it's computer programming, but it's not necessarily learning specific languages, but just learning the concepts and more the architectural, like the math and stuff of it, and actually designing algorithms and so on. Like the science of using computers to solve problems. And so it doesn't necessarily fit with a sysadmin role very well at all. And that's why rather than getting a degree in CS myself, I went to like a technical college and got, they actually took a course that they called it Network Engineering and Security Analysis, but it was literally sysadmin. You learned sysadmin for Windows, Linux, BSD, and Cisco. And actually, when I took it, they also taught Novell in addition. And then we had so the classes were like how to set up like wireless, TCP/IP, advanced TCP/IP in v6, virtualization, Windows admin, Linux admin, FreeBSD admin, and that kind of stuff. So if there's something like that, where you're talking like a 1 or 2 year practical program
Yeah.
where you spend your time sitting at a computer learning to sysadmin stuff, that would be much more valuable
Yeah.
if that's the goal you have than a program that's teaching you like low-level C programming or something.
Yeah, I would
But
tend
it's
to
not
agree.
necessarily like the most programming we did was we did a little bit of shell scripting, and we had a class on Perl, and they've since added a class on PowerShell. But that's the kind of stuff you dealt with, and so it was 20 hours a week of actually sitting at a computer doing stuff. They kind of moved away from having too much type lecture content even. It was just, all right, so here's a scenario of a company, set up the group policies to do this and that other thing. Or the Linux one was, all right, set up these groups and these users and set it up and make it so they can print to this virtual printer, which was, it would actually output like a PostScript file that you could view as a PDF. But, it kind of was good. They've dumbed it down a little bit because students nowadays aren't as smart. I don't know what happened.
Yeah. The last
it's
generation.
I think it was, people that grew up always having a computer don't have the same interest in it.
Fascination. It's,
and like when I was a student, there was no one in my class who didn't know how to add extra hardware to the computer. Right? Like, everybody had bought a CD burner as an add-on to their computer and attached it or whatever. I knew how to add an extra hard drive or something. When I was teaching, there were a lot of people that had never opened a computer. And it was just like, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of them is just because they've always only ever had a laptop, maybe.
Yeah, they're more productized now, too. They're more complete, sealed
basically, once it's not a new thing, it becomes like your TV. You turn it on, entertainment comes out, you turn it off. You don't care how it works.
I have a feeling people said this a lot about cars, too, as they were probably.
We've definitely got away from the age where everybody tinkered on their own car.
Yeah. And now we're the car people. That's what we put for computers.
Yeah.
Good luck, Craig. I think.
In particular, I just look at the curriculum for your CS master program there, and if it doesn't talk about any of the stuff you need, the skills you need to be a sysadmin, then it's possibly not what you're after.
I much agree.
I've kind of had the same niggling stuff, like especially when I spent a week at the University of Cambridge in the UK. Hanging out with all the people there, doing research and just, building a new hardware and stuff. It's like, oh, that's all, if I ever went back to school, I'd want to come here and do this. And then it's like, that's really completely outside anything I've ever done before. And it would I'd have to learn a bunch of stuff before I could even start on this.
And Craig, you could check out a sponsor that doesn't sponsor this show, but linuxacademy.com, /coders to get a discount. And they have a bunch of courses that you could kind of check out too. And a lot of them are probably more up your line for system administration.
But admittedly, I kind of did like he was suggesting and just learning on my own, and then I got a certification or whatever. So what I did was I learned most of it on my own, and then I went and took the class. I had done some Windows admin, but I wasn't that familiar with group policies. But I knew how Windows permissions worked, but not group policies and stuff.
Right.
So I learned some stuff, and then the Linux, I knew most of it, but they filled in a lot of blanks.
Yeah.
Because I'd always been a BSD guy, so a lot of the Linux stuff didn't make that much sense. I was always annoyed when I sat down a Red Hat 9 box, and I'm like, there's no GCC. How can you do anything? What the hell?
Well, this isn't a real computer.
Yeah.
All right, Alan. Mad Max writes in with a question about virtualization, specifically with the intent of cross-building. He says, I'm toying with the idea to create a web service where you would just submit your Git repo and it would do a cross-platform CI build.
Which is continuous integration. It's
so as they update them?
Compiling every time you make a change to make sure that your change doesn't break compiling.
Right. And they would be for Windows, Linux, BSD, and maybe even the Mac. It appears that Jenkins has the ability to work in master-slave configuration, so it seems like a perfect fit for the job. The problem I have is the slave part. The VM should be able to spin up fast and be persistent, so most of the code and object files are cached. Cloud would even seem like a great solution, but I think no provider allows you to simply suspend VMs while not paying the full price. I actually think.
Well, it depends. Most of them. Well, the VM is off and not using any CPU or RAM. You only pay for the storage continuously.
Yeah.
As far as storing the thing, you might want to look at Ccache. There's a system for caching compile binary stuff.
Yeah.
And you could use that to keep one consistent, like a persistent one of those, and have the VMs be able to lose their state in between. And also, if you're doing CI, there's yes and no there. It's like, do you want to waste the CPU time recompiling stuff that didn't change? But, you just want to hope that the cache isn't going to interfere with anything. But yeah, you could also look at using Ccache to externalize that. But as far as I know, most VM providers, if you turn the machine off all the way, you're only paying for the storage, not for the CPU time and stuff anymore.
So he's kind of looking for a virtualization solution to pull this off.
Right. And then he talks about like Docker or jails. So at FreeBSD, they use Beehive, so a complete VM, and then they run Jenkins inside of it, and it compiles the stuff. And they do that mostly so that they, rather than doing different platforms, they do all the different versions of FreeBSD, right? So they compile stuff on a bunch of different versions to make sure it all works, and compile the different versions on different versions, and all over the bunch of different mixes in that. So Jenkins is the one I've heard of. I've heard some people are not happy with it, but in general, it seems like it should work. And that, and then he mentions his own private cloud using CloudStack or OpenStack, but it's probably something like KVM or Beehive would be easier in that case. So KVM and to spin up a bunch of them is probably easier. Really, to build a web service like this, you probably want to scale it simply. So start with just one server, and you can spin up, 5 VMs on it without a problem, and run your CI stuff. And then once it actually gets going, you can add more servers.
Yeah.
And so you might want to consider something like CloudStack or OpenStack if you're going to have to spin up a lot of VMs all the time. But at the same time, you don't want to overcomplicate it in the beginning, and you don't want to, spend a lot of money on infrastructure when this service is just getting started.
When you suspend a droplet, I don't think you get charged for it when it's off. So
I think you still have to pay for the storage space so that they don't delete the files.
I don't actually have any just sitting off. But the other thing is they have the API, so you could probably use the API to automate the spin up and creation of new VMs, especially if they were just clones of existing ones. So there's a lot of ways you could do it.
So what you would do, I think, in this case is build a Windows Linux BSD, and possibly, I don't know how you'd do a Mac one, honestly, but
I don't think
Windows Linux and a BSD VM at DO, and then when somebody submits a job, you would clone that image that you had created, run it, do their work, and then throw it away. And then you could have either the web server could contain the CC cache or whatever, or you could instead turn it off and then turn it back on later. But you don't want to be maintaining a clone of each OS for each customer that has ever done anything. But if you have them, if they're subscribing and they're paying for it, maybe. But
it's a bit big though.
It's definitely something you would be able to do with the DO API, I think. Or yes, you could just you rent one server from a regular server place or whatever, and then run 5 VMs on it.
Run a bunch of VMs.
Yeah, especially if you're only if you're gonna do one job at a time, then you can just have the Jenkins run on each of the platforms and do the job. When it's done, you can do the next job, kind of thing.
I know the OpenSUSE build service spins up Zen on the back end to do test environments and stuff while it's building packages. So I know they're using a lot of automated Zen stuff. Yep. Good luck, Mad Max. All right, our last email comes in from Bart with a question that hankers back to our coverage of TrueCrypt. I know you haven't talked about this in a while, he says, since the death of TrueCrypt, but I'm really struggling to come up with a good cross-platform encryption solution that does hold disk encryption, so cross-platform and hold disk. Here's a quick description of the need.
I guess the first problem with cross-platform hold disk encryption is there's not a cross-platform hold disk file system. Unless, what are you going to use, FAT32? And so that's really the problem, is that there is no hold disk encryption that's cross-platform.
He would have used TrueCrypt in the past, he says.
Right, but there's not really a file system that's cross-platform perfectly either.
Yeah.
That you would want to use, really.
Yeah.
And so that's where the problem is twofold there.
He says he wants to stay away from OS-specific solutions like BitLocker.
Right. Or Geli, or what's the Linux one? They have a couple.
There's Lux, and there's a few. Yeah.
And really, that's the problem, is that those are the only ones that really exist. And, there's really even not an OS-agnostic file system that's very good. I'm honestly surprised no one's written a good open source basic file system that you can use easily on Windows and Linux and everything.
Yeah.
Because FAT32 has kind of been the de facto for that, and maybe a bit of NTFS, but NTFS on Linux and other platforms
and the
has
Mac
never
is
been
just
perfect.
It's not. I don't even know on the Mac. I don't know if you can read it. I think maybe you can read only on the Mac. I'm not sure what it does by default.
On FreeBSD, there used to be a read-only one included. Now they just send you to the Fuse read-write one, the same one from Linux. But it works, but you wouldn't want to be using it full time. Like it's useful for reading data off a USB stick back and forth, maybe, but it's really not something you would want to be doing all the time.
Yeah, I'm struggling to come up with a really good solution other than when it comes down to whole drive encryption. I guess so.
There's really not that many offerings, and that's why you might be better off with something that's encrypting individual files that in a portable way.
I mean, Bart, you say you don't want to use BitLocker. I mean, I know there. See, you say in here that you don't trust it, and you've heard about issues after updates. Well, backup is kind of your solution there, and a BitLocker is probably fine unless it's the U.S. government or Microsoft's themselves that you're worried about protecting from. If it's like casual loss of a laptop and somebody picks up a laptop, BitLocker is probably going to protect you there, assuming you're using a good password, right? So you also have to consider what is the scope of the protection you need. I would say the same thing with FileVault on the Mac or Lux on Linux, right? It's good enough that unless it's somebody that is like a state-sponsored attacker, which is just probably not realistic, you're probably okay. And could there be updates that have broken BitLocker? Yeah, that sounds like a Microsoft thing. But also, truth be told, Windows 8.1 is getting pretty mature now, or Windows 7 is mature. So it's in that area now where it's getting pretty safe. And then you offset that risk with backups.
Yeah, but I guess even for like a individual file encryption, there's not really a solution that is very portable. Like obviously you can GPG encrypt a file or whatever, but then you have to have it on the machines every time you want to access it, and it's kind of more encrypt decrypt. You can't really mount it as a volume. Yeah. So yes, TrueCrypt was quite compelling, and it's gone, and it's something that's really hard to do correctly, and that's why there's not really a solution out there for it.
Maybe the audience can send us in some of their recommendations of things that they've tried and that have worked well for them.
I'm just not sure that there is a good answer to this question currently.
TechSNAP at JupiterBroadcasting.com or click the contact link. We are officially at Inbox Zero as of this recording, so it's a good opportunity to get your question in front of us, and we'll answer it on a future edition. Just go to Jupiter Broadcasting, click the contact link, choose TechSNAP from the drop-down, or go over to the subreddit, techsnap.reddit.com. But with the emails all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that just didn't fit at the top of the show, but we still want to talk about them and give you some links to follow up on your own after the show. And a lot of these links came from our subreddit over at techsnap.reddit.com. Yep. And we're going to start with one of my favorite topics, lots of storage. It's a storage drive, a 6 terabyte hard drive face-off. So when you're talking storage, 6 terabytes is a lot of storage. And this is from the good guys over at Backblaze. Boy, but you can tell I've been doing a lot of podcasts today.
Mm-hmm.
And I love when Backblaze does this kind of stuff. I don't actually use their service, but this kind of stuff makes me want to.
Mm-hmm.
So they showed data stored on each day, and they give us some charts here on...
So basically, they built 2 pods, each having 45 of the 6 terabyte drives, and basically did a face-off of the Seagates versus the Western Digitals. Yep. And as a control, they also threw in one of their existing 45 4 terabyte drives of the Hitachis.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the problem with some of their data is that they didn't start the 2 machines on the same day, so they didn't fill at the same rate.
Yeah.
But then they used the fill rate as the benchmark. So they're like, well, on average, the Seagate only wrote 4 terabytes a day instead of 5, like the Western Digital. But how much of that is just because that's how much data there was that day, and so on. I was not 100% pleased with their methodology, and specifically, they failed the Brendan Gegg test of they didn't seem to ask the question, why was the Seagate a terabyte a day slower?
Right. Yep. That is the benchmark.
They basically seem to be, they're like, okay, so the Western Digital filled up faster, so we should buy Western Digital drives. It's like, well, you didn't even look at why? And this is all based on a sample of one machine.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem
Of one pod,
that
yeah.
great. Yeah.
3 different storage pods and all.
Right.
I agree with you on that.
So as far as they looked at it on their factors, none of the drives failed on either, so they did no comparison there. After 3 months, none of them had any reliability issues or smart things. The costs were both the same. The Seagate drives were 7,200 RPM, so they used a little bit more electricity than the Western Digital drives, which were 5,400 RPM. So that raises the bigger question of how were the Seagates slower?
Yeah.
Or why?
And that really emphasizes
it could have nothing to do with the hard drive,
Yeah.
and that's why I'm a little iffy on their data.
Yeah, really.
Like if they had done a test where they set them up in a controlled environment and try to write this much data and see if one of them can't keep up or something, but they didn't really. It was a little weird. Now they say part of the reason for preferring the Western Digital drives is obviously the power savings multiplied by 45 drives per machine times 10 machines per cabinet adds up pretty quickly. The saving heat and saving power by using the slower drive, but it really doesn't answer the question, why is the drive slower?
Yeah. A good data point, but lots of questions still. And I like like you pointed out, you have to be able to answer why it's like that.
Yeah. So they're ordering more drives, and they're going to have 5 of each at the pods now. And maybe we'll see what's going on.
So you're saying they're going to open the pod bay door and install hard drives?
Yes. So they specifically mentioned that the Seagate drives perform well, albeit they loaded a little slower. But it definitely seems like they haven't even looked in to see why.
Yeah.
They said they use a little bit more electricity than but they're not shut out because they prefer not to have all one type of hard drive. They said the diversification is good, and we expect to order additional Seagate 6 terabyte drives over the coming months and do those as well.
They're going to base some purchases off the data, so they trust it.
Yeah. Well, so basically they bought the Western Digital drives, and maybe they'll buy more Seagate drives. They also say that they also just ordered 45 of the Hitachi 8 terabyte helium drives. Currently, those drives are still too expensive for them to buy a lot of them. But they're going to run one of them to start testing it and see how the longevity is and so on. And then they also say that Seagate is beginning to ship their 8 terabyte shingled magnetic drives, which are 8 terabytes for only $260 a drive, which is quite cheap.
Store all the things.
Yeah, like that's only like 3.2 cents a gigabyte. But I think those particular drives might be more desktop oriented. I don't think they're the host-aware SMR.
And they're they're like a weird speed, right? They're like 5,900 RPM or something. Not even.
Well, no, these are the shingled ones. I don't even know if the RPM how that works.
I think I read something about the shingled ones have a weird speed.
They have a 4 terabyte drive that was the weird 5,900 RPM.
Okay.
But I don't know what the speed for the shingled magnetic ones is at all.
Okay.
But they're looking what they can do there, because that would be 360 terabytes in each pod, and they would love to have that because it means buying a lot fewer pods. Interesting data, but not the best benchmark of the 2 drives, honestly.
Now, this next roundup story made it in here really just because of this headline. Researchers make BitTorrent anonymous and impossible to shut down. That's right. Brace yourselves. It's called Tribbler, and it makes BitTorrent anonymous and impossible to shut down. At least that's what a researcher says. Tribbler creates a new dedicated network for anonymity and anonymity. Why do I have such a hard time with that one? And it's in no way connected to the main Tor network. By using Tribbler, you become part of a Tor-like network and help others also become anonymous. This means you no longer have exposure in any swarm, either downloading or seeding, he says.
I guess the question is, how do they solve the problem of the fact that Tor is stupid slow?
So this is interesting, Alan. In the UI they have in the article here for Torrent Freak.
So you definitely do a lot fewer hops. Like with Tor, I think you always do at least 5 hops or something.
But you can slide it down to less speed, and then you are more hidden, or more speed and less hidden.
Yeah. And in their example, they're downloading a file from Vodo, which is a company that distributes into movies via torrents legally. So obviously they're there's not a need to be anonymous for that particular one, but they had to have something like that for their use case.
Alan, breaking news: ICANN has been hacked. It is devastating. The entire internet has actually been shut down. So I don't know if anybody heard this. You probably didn't because your internet's been shut down. It's horrible.
So yeah, ICANN, which is the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers.
Yeah.
So they're the guys that control. They're the guys that caused us to be suffering with all these new top-level domains.
Hey, like jbdev.community
Yeah.
or recipes.
So they control all the top-level domains and technically have oversight over IANA, which gives out IP addresses.
Yeah.
Then to things like Erin, which is the one that does it for North America. Anyway, so they say, we believe a spear phishing attack was initiated in late November 2014. It involved email messages that were crafted to appear to come from their own internal domain and were sent to members of their staff. The attack resulted in the compromise of the email credentials of several staff members. They then used that to access the centralized zone data system and the wiki pages of internal stuff, the Whois portal, and the ICANN blog.
Not the wiki.
So the CZDS service is used by domain registrars and other interested parties to request access to the DNS root zone files and sensitive data associated with the user's account online. This provides hackers access to zone files and sensitive information such as names, postal addresses, email addresses, fax, stuff that would be in your Whois, and also possibly usernames and cryptographically hashed passwords of account holders. So they stole the database. Luckily, it was properly hashed. It's still, I'm not 100% clear on what this CZDS actually does, but...
And a good old Spheres phishing attack right through that email, Alan. Just get that email in there, click that link,
it's like,
just get that all set up.
Shouldn't ICANN know how to deal with it? But, the problem is that every company has secretaries and lawyers and not computer-savvy people.
CEOs, yes.
All
right.
I don't know if ICANN actually has a CEO.
No, I'm just saying. It's sometimes just the executives that click on stuff.
It's basically the non-computer people that cause all the problems.
Yeah, usually it's true. All right, Google's end-to-end email encryption tool that we talked about a long time ago is getting closer. It's actually like more than a year and a half.
They posted the code to GitHub for people to start auditing.
Yes. It's been up on GitHub for a little bit, right? Especially as we're recording this. I don't remember. Anyways, don't want to get the timelines confused, but it's a work in progress, and it's going to snap in with Gmail. So I don't know, Alan. I'm going to give it a go when it comes. The only thing is, it's going to be a Chrome plugin. So for those of you that aren't using Chrome.
And so it's how useful is the end-to-end if the other end doesn't have it? Or, in particular, so I saw this plugin in my Chrome, so I can read the email when I'm on this machine, but if I go to this other machine or read it on my phone, I can't read the email, so the hell.
With its key server, Google is taking a more centralized approach. Users' public keys will be automatically registered with the server, and the director will publish the key. When somebody then wants to send an encrypted email to another end user, the system will check the key directory for the right key and encrypt it. You can read more about the exact details in a link in the article.
Yeah, so this is was supposed to be like GPG compatible, but implemented in JavaScript using elliptic curve keys so that they used less CPU time in the JavaScript. And then, just a Google managed key server. So it's really not that different than GPG. It's just taking out a bunch of the manual steps. Although it really kind of takes out the key trust stuff, but it's just, locking it to the email address. Since Google, that's the identity key for Google.
Yeah.
Where GPG is more along the lines of you're trying to tie an email address to an actual person, right? The idea with GPG is that you have key signing parties and stuff. And, when I got my key signed, I had to show people my passport and prove my identity. Versus with Google's, it's just like, well, yes, this is the person that logged into
this Google account.
This person at gmail.com.
Yep, that's a good point, Alan. That's a bit of a difference, isn't it?
But if it only works for Gmail to Gmail, then that's not that useful. How do external people register for this key server and so on?
Alan, when you're a company like Amazon, a small little glitch on the website can cost you quite a bit.
Right. Well, in this case, it wasn't actually Amazon. Amazon was only tangentially related to the whole thing. So this was people who sell on Amazon Marketplace.
Oh, yeah.
Some of them use a certain piece of software from a third party to list the stuff on Amazon. So it helps you manage, if you have a giant Amazon store, you don't want to be managing it with the Amazon web interface, right? Use the API. Well, the app that uses the Amazon API to change the price of stuff in your store had a glitch in it and changed everything to be 1 British penny.
That's a good sale.
Yeah. So Brendan Doherty, who's the chief executive of the Northern Ireland and New York-based Repricer Express, which is the name of the software, said its investigation was continuing, but the problem had been corrected about an hour after it repriced everything to 1 cent. And however, it took a further few hours to get the incorrect prices reverted back to the original prices.
Oh, that makes me smile.
In the meantime, people placed a lot of orders. Amazon canceled most of the orders that they found, and then they're dealing with the ones that got through. I guess Amazon's going to possibly compensate the sellers for this, apparently. I don't know. Which is interesting because Amazon really had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
It was random sellers using, like, as far as I know, not certified external software. Maybe it is certified by Amazon for use for them or recommended or something, and so they had to take some culpability.
That
but
could be. Well,
and then on the Slashdot thread, people had questioned, Amazon just canceling these orders. People entered a contract, but almost all advertisements contain, or terms of sales or whatever, contain a glitch where it's like, if it was obviously a typo in the price, you can't force us to sell you it for 1 cent.
Yeah. So Network World has an article about 9 data breaches where somebody actually lost their job, which seems like that almost never happens, but...
Yeah, so I thought it would... apparently most of these are actually government jobs.
Well, there you go.
Interesting.
There you go.
But I just thought that was an interesting read.
Yeah, Target. Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh.
Well, technically, the CIO and the CEO both ended up resigning. Neither of them actually got fired, so that's... But
Texas State Comptroller, the Utah State Department of Technology Service. Yeah. Yeah, there's some Gold Health Systems. Highmark. Yeah. Yep. A good one, Alan. Yep. All right. So that'll be in the roundup. All right, Alan. And our last roundup story for this week is sort of a warning for those that have QNAP NAS storages.
Yes, or anybody that hasn't patched yet. But the shell shock exploit, which we probably thought we had heard the end of months ago when everybody patched, but lots of people didn't patch, and lots of people didn't realize that their external, their appliance-type devices were vulnerable. So the QNAP NAS devices have bash on them and reachable from the web interface, I suppose. And so they're in the wild, they're currently being exploited, and all these NAS devices are being taken over.
Jeez, that's the worst. And probably takes a while to pick up on your NAS getting hacked when you just got like a home NAS unit. It probably take a few days.
Well,
it's
and
network
some of
running
these
slow.
are possibly, company NASs and stuff, right?
Yep.
Small office type NASs and so on. But yeah, so, that's the interesting thing about a couple of these bugs like Heartbleed and Shell Shock and so on, is that people don't realize that every appliance they have has this technology in it as well.
Oh, yeah.
And that they don't really get updated at the same people can be very fastidious about installing the patches on their desktop or, the Windows updates or Linux updates or whatever, but nobody thinks about updating the firmware on their NAS the first Tuesday of every month or whatever.
It's an appliance. It's hard to think of it like that. We need like some sort of...
especially when you start looking at things like routers where it doesn't really have an OS so much as just a firmware.
Right.
And it's,
Yep. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of this week's TechSNAP. Now, we'd love to have you join us live. The TechSNAP show, especially today, it's a long show live. Like, you think TechSNAP's long? You should check it out live. Plus, we talk with folks during the break, often engage with the chat room, and you get to help name our show. So join us over at jblive.tv. We do it at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is...
4 p.m. Eastern, 2100 UTC.
Yep, and that's on a Thursday over at jblive.tv or jblive.info for the audio-only version. Go over to the website, look for episode 195, and you'll find the show notes for everything we talked about. Things are linked in pretty much chronological order of the show. You just scroll down past the downloads, and you'll find all that goodness there. Also, the contact page. Send us in your email questions and feedback. Just choose TechSNAP from the drop-down. And last but not least, help contribute to the content over at the subreddit at techsnap.reddit.com. All right, that brings us to the end. Thank you, everybody. Don't forget RSS feeds, too, to get the show weekly. And then you don't even have to worry about any of that stuff I just said. You'll just download it for you. And you can find links to that in the show notes as well. Okay, boom. That brings us to the end of this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.